Hello, this is the 14th episode of the designfootball.com podcast. My name's Jay. I write blogs on designfootball.com. Today I'm joined by Simon Shakeshaft, known as Shakey, who is the curator of the National Football Shirt Collection, connoisseur and collector of football shirts, and also a co-author of the Arsenal Shirt book. Hi Shakey, how's it going?
Good morning to you, Jay, or good evening if you're listening at night. Not too bad, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so Shakey, you're a collector. You're particularly into Matchworn shirts, and everything you deal with is to do with the curation of Matchworn shirts generally. What got you into Matchworn shirts in the first place?
Okay, like any young boy who likes football, and I think the majority do, I started out life collecting cards and stickers and programs and badges, and it progressed like you do. And then the football shirt, remember I was born in the era when the football shirt, replica shirt boom took off. So I had a Wales kit, and I was a proper full kit one of them, wearing my Wales kit for a lot of the time in the late 70s, when it was actually semi-acceptable for all my English mates to wear a Wales Admiral shirt. But of course, I took precedent over all of them because I was actually Welsh. And so I started to, buy a few shirts or get shirts bought for me, and interested in shirts in general. Obviously, the 80s was a major change in fashion and design with regard to shirts and the culture. The 80s was a big cultural era, and I'm definitely an 80s man. Then I obviously went away and trained as a physiotherapist, and ended up as qualifying as a physio, or what they would call a physical trainer, or a physical sports trainer, or a physical therapist, or whatever the Americans want to call you. And I think they call them sports therapists these days as well. So there's all sorts of titles, but I ended up qualifying enough. My qualifications were enough for me to go and work in football, and I started working in professional football in 1993. And for the club I was working at was my team I supported, actually, Hereford United, the first club I worked at. And from there, every time we played a bigger team, and no disrespect to my beloved Hereford United, RIP, they're no longer with us. We played a bigger team in the cup competition, etc. Then it was interesting to see if I could get a Matchworn shirt, or a player's shirt from that team. And as I've explained in the past, the first shirt I ever got given was a Brian Roy Nottingham Forest shirt when we played him in the League Cup, and it kind of piqued my interest then to realise that one of the jobs I did when I qualified as a physio was at Hereford United for 2 seasons. I was actually the kit man as well. So my predecessor, P. Isaacs at Hereford, had been at the club for so long. He was part of the furniture there, but he did everything. He treated the players. He warmed the players up for training and match days, and he was in charge of looking after the apprentices. I mean, I'm sure that he was treating players with a broom sticking out of his backside, brushing the treatment room floor before he went home. That's how he used to work. He was just unbelievable. So he made a rod for my back. So it was acceptable then at lower levels of professional football at the time that the physio would also do the kit. So I although, excuse my dog in the background, although I did the kit, a lot of it was in coordination, or coordinating the apprentices to help me pack the first team kit for away games and put the first team kit out for home games. So I got an interest in shirts then as well, but without the realization that I would later on become an avid collector of Hereford United shirts. And from the era I was kit man, I do not have a home Matchworn shirt. And then yet, when I closed the cupboard the last time I did it, and we brought in a specific kit man, there were 4 full sets of kit of that particular style of shirt, and yet I haven't got one. So where did they all go? you know.
Is that sort of a dedication? Is that a professionalism? So that your own shirts in your own role as a kit man are sort of sacrosanct. You can't take them away, but other team shirts and sort of other kit men that give you things and things you pick up in through matches against other teams, they're okay. They're fair game. Would that be the reason? Maybe.
I'm not necessarily. I don't necessarily think that's the case. For me personally, I didn't necessarily see Hereford United shirts as something that I would take such an interest in later on in, you know, as I grew up, as it were. The Hereford United shirts themselves, I'm absolutely gutted that I can't find one of these shirts now, that particular style. But it wasn't anything necessarily to do with the fact that they were sacrosanct. Although, when all the kitmen I've ever worked with subsequently are so precious about kit. It's unbelievable. Even Keith, the guy that took on the kitman role after me, and Keith, I'm sure Keith had a Rottweiler sat in the corner and an alarm that went off at the police station if someone stepped over the white line into the kit room without him being present. And he was frightening. You know, players would come in and go, I'm missing a slip for the training today, or I need a pair of socks, Keith, and he'd make them sign for them. And if I can tell one quick story, we had a player at Hereford United who was an absolute legend at Swindon Town called Steve White as a striker. In the 2 seasons he was at Hereford, the 1 season he actually won the Golden Boot for the Football League. Scored 32 goals or something, I think, in 1 season. And Steve was a proper dedicated professional. And we played Swindon. He was one of those players that apprentices said to me, who should I try and be like if I want to go on and succeed in the game? I would have said at Hereford, try and be like Steve. And try and be like Chalky, as he was called. But we played Swindon in the, what was the auto windscreen, Tesco's trolley, Johnson's paint trophy thing, or whatever it was called at that time, and the Football League trophy or whatever it's called. And we played Swindon away. They were top of Division 3 at the time. Hereford were in the bottom tier, the old 4th division in old money, and Swindon were top of the 3rd division at the time. And of course, it's only the bottom 2 teams, the teams in the bottom 2 divisions, 3rd and 4th divisions, that played in that trophy at the time. So we played Swindon. I think it was like the area quarterfinals. And of course, Steve White was the only guy I've ever seen at a stadium get a standing ovation from all sides of the ground when he turned up. As it happened, he scored the winning goal. Hereford won 1-0. And he came off with a slight calf strain. And as he's coming off, he's getting a standing ovation from all sides of the ground. Anyway, after the game, he came up to me and Keith, the kit man, and said, do you know where my teeth are? Because he obviously had a bit of a Joe Jordan going on with a false tooth and a plate. And I said, I haven't got a clue, mate. He said, come on, Shakey, do you know? And I said, no, I ain't got a clue. And Keith's like, oh, well, I'm more concerned we've lost 3 slips and 2 towels and 2 pairs of socks. And so anyway, I said, after he had to go out and do the press, you see, so that's what he was more concerned about, and to do the press with his tooth missing. So he did the press, came back in, and he said, what do you want me to do? And I said, I need to see you tomorrow just to assess the injury. Anyway, next day he comes in. Keith was like Baresi when players were around and kit was missing. Yeah. He clung to Chalky, walks through the door, and Keith's on him straight away. Chalky, we're missing 3 slips from last night. You don't know where any of them are, do you? And he's like, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about, Keith. Don't know anything about it. So he's walked down into the dressing room, and at Hereford United, for anyone who's ever been there, the old dressing rooms used to have a long corridor to go down to, either home or away. They both had long corridors. So he walked down the long corridor to the dressing room. Keith followed him ahead of me. So I'm walking in behind him into the first team dressing room, and Chalky's put his bag down and Keith's in it straight away. He said, what are you doing? He said, no, I'm just trying to check whether you've got anything in there from last night. And he rummaged around, and no word of a lie, Chalky still hadn't found his tooth, you see, and his plate and his false teeth. And Keith went, here it is, and he pulled out a slip, and the slip unravelled, and Chalky's tooth fell out of it. And so his plate fell out, and so the lads had actually wrapped it up in his slip. And for those who don't know, a slip in football is a pair of pants, basically. Yeah. and he'd wrapped it up in his slip and hidden it at the bottom of his bag. So, but Keith found it by being busy, as kit men are, but also very protective. They are very, very protective people of their kits. So,
yeah, I suppose there's just there should be a general appreciation of kit men for doing their job so well, and also you get sort of a bonus element to it when something like that happens. So for him being so desperate to find that, you end up finding his tooth as well.
I did read a tweet the other day that Roger, who's now the Hereford FC kitman, who was previously the Hereford United kitman at the end of the demise of the old club, Roger had said on the team bus coming back from a game recently, and I think it was tweeted by the club chairman, that he'd actually laundered so many thousand of socks this season. He actually had the exact number of socks that he'd actually laundered this season. Now that's taken, I mean, somebody said he must have a notepad. You know, that's taken it to the extreme to actually know exactly how many pairs of socks you have laundered this season. But yeah, they are precious. They should be appreciated a lot more for what they do. Because if you remember, if you think about it, the two men, apart from the manager, the two other occupations in football that are in the front line on match days are the medical team, so the physiotherapist, and nowadays in the top flight, especially the doctor, as we know with Chelsea, but also the kitmen, because if they go out looking like rag-ass rovers, then the kitmen are the people who are going to have their back ends hanging out the window to get spanked, aren't they? So, you know, when we all love to go, oh, did you know that so-and-so turned up today and had to wear so-and-so's away kit?
Yeah.
You know, they're great for us shirt anoraks to talk about those sorts of things, but the stress that will cause the kitman will be unbearable, you know?
Yeah, terrible day at the office, that. Yeah.
It is, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that shows sort of what your trajectory was. So how you, because I wasn't aware of that you as a kid you were actually interested in sort of different football kit designs, and then that transition to how you got hold of your first Matchworn shirt, and then it went from there. So what's the difference between a replica shirt and a Matchworn shirt for you?
Well, obviously in the 80s and the 90s, there were player shirts were obviously bespoke. They still are with a lot of the clubs. Let's say a lot of the bigger clubs, you know, they have different levels of contract, don't they, now for their technical support with their kits. But I noticed that, for instance, you know, replica kits have a heat transfer. They used to have heat transfer badges, and the player shirts had cloth stitched on badges and things. So they were bespoke. They were totally different. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. My Admiral kit that I wore, my Wales Admiral kit, the famous Tramlines kit, I wore it to death, but it was the most uncomfortable thing in the world. You know, it was nylon. So the static used to light up the street when I used to take it off at the end of the day, if I did take it off. It gave me the worst jogger's nipples ever. You know, I mean, I would have still worn it if my nipples were bleeding, which I'm sure they were at some stage, from the nylon rubbing me. And of course, after so many washes, the badge, the shiny vinyl plastic badge that's in the middle of the chest, starts to fade and crack and peel, as do the Admiral logos on the collar. So then wind forward, however many years it was, I think the first time I got hold of one was 2003. So we're talking 26 years forward until I get my hands on a player's shirt. And it was just I can't explain the joy of getting my hands on a player's shirt, but the feel and the difference in this shirt was remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, that it was cotton. The cloth badges were Admiral badges on the collars were cloth. The badge in the center of the chest was cloth and stitched on. And even the tram lines were not incorporated within the material, and they weren't made of nylon, but they were a strip that was actually stitched onto the shirt, rather than incorporated within the shirt as they were on the replicas. And I think that's what, there's varying degrees of collecting shirts, right? From replicas. Even I know there's people out there bizarrely that collect fake shirts, and or the cheapest shirt they can get their hands on, as long as it's in the style that it looks like the team they're trying to collect shirt. Yeah. So they'll go from that level all the way up to the guys that spend thousands of pounds buying a match-worn shirt from a significant player from a significant occasion. And in between those levels, there are various degrees of collecting shirts. And we all have different collecting principles, whether you collect replicas or you collect match-worn shirts, all are different. It's just that as you go the further up the scale, the actual number of people collecting those shirts gets less, because there aren't many people I know that can go and collect, spend thousands of pounds a time buying match-worn shirts. So those are I suppose they're the small 1% of the shirt collecting fraternity. And then you come down the scale from there. And I progressed on. People progress. You go through the various stages. You have your replicas, and then you think, oh, and I'm intrigued. And nowadays, of course, it's different because you can go and buy the player bespoke shirts that the players don when they running around in their stadiums on a Saturday, for the clubs that have differences between their replicas and their player shirts. And you can buy the blank ones now. And so people now, there's a sort of another level been put into the collecting market, where you've got people who just specifically collect what the guys in the Far East have christened PIs, or player issue shirts.
Yeah. So this is the thing. I understand, because that shirt you mentioned there, the Tramlines Wales shirt. So that's the one that you wrote about for the 50 greatest football shirts ever. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand the logic entirely there. And the headline of it is that the replica shirt at the time was a far inferior product to the shirt that the players wore. And I think most people would agree with that, because there was more care and effort put into the player's shirt, in both the depth of how it was created and the feel. So everything was better about that shirt. But if we jump forward to now, would you still say that's the case? Or are replica shirts, as I understand, the replica shirts are built for durability. They will have depth to, say, the crest, when the players don't really need that. They have like a heat transfer a lot for the crest. Is that still a superior product? And does it still have the draw for someone like you?
It does. Obviously, the market is diluted now, because you have a major issue with the availability of certain styles. Not all the kits from all the clubs become available in what I would call a player spec shirt, player specification shirt over a replica shirt. And I know that now manufacturers are getting very wise to it, that they have various levels of shirt available in retail, up to a blank shirt, which I would call a player spec shirt. They're available. Sometimes there are subtle differences, like I think Nike produced box sets of Arsenal shirts and Manchester United shirts when they were supplying Manchester United, and they were slightly different. And I think they did it with England shirts as well. Slightly different. They've got like extra wash label in there that isn't in the player shirt that they wear on the match. Yeah. But you've got to remember, for me, it's about comfort and all the technology that those companies spend fortunes researching, which 99% of people don't give a damn about. They end up channeling all that money into the shirts that the players will wear. Now, that's important, because there's obviously, they talk about 1% makes a massive difference in top level sporting performance. And if that helps, I mean, somebody said to me that this would have been 10 years ago, somebody said that I watched a program, they were talking about research, I think it was Canterbury, that had put into a normal shirt, a normal material shirt, and then whether you call it the wicking effect, the ones where this, the sweat gets absorbed through the material and it's supposed to evaporate off the body, etc. And the normal shirt could weigh up to 6 pounds by the end of the game, more than this one with all the technological advances in it, the wiki one, whatever you want to call it. And that makes a difference. That's like carrying 3 bags of sugar around with you by the end of a game. As a professional athlete, that's gonna affect your performance, surely.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the players, should benefit from that technology, but ultimately it's their works clothes. But when you come back to collecting those shirts, obviously the market's diluted now, because I still want to buy or obtain one of those shirts, right? But because there's a market out there now that's for player specification shirts, and the readily available patches, sleeve patches, name sets, numbers, whatever it is that's out there, you can get it and you can make a shirt into almost identical, if not identical, to what a player would put on and wear in a game. And one of the questions I commonly get asked by other people, and I'm always suspicious when they ask me, what size does so-and-so wear? Because that's kind of the last piece of the jigsaw for me, that they are trying to produce a shirt that is exactly the same as what a player would wear. Aaron Ramsey would wear for Arsenal. What size does Aaron Ramsey wear? Why do you want to know? I just want to, and I'm not saying that every single person asking me that question is doing it with the intention of being unscrupulous. Okay. But what I'm always suspicious of it. And that's just because I've had a bad experience with people doing it, and that's why I love things like the England shirt. You can go and buy, or will be able to buy eventually, I'm sure, the new Vapor England shirts, for instance. But what the player shirts have that you won't be able to buy is the match detail that's on the shirt. And of course, it's tonal now, so you can't hardly see it until you get one of them up close, as you've seen before. But so the people who want to fake these shirts, I call them fakes, but they're not technically fakes. They're trying to make them exactly what their heroes wear. And there isn't anything wrong with that. But me being suspicious all the time, because I've seen it when it first started, people were doing it for the wrong reasons. And then they invent a story and they sell it as Matchworn, and it's not Matchworn. It's never even been near the dressing room or the play or anything. But that's what happens. And I'm always suspicious of people, and it's probably unfairly in 95% of cases. But sadly, there's the 5% who've got, more front than Harrods, that will actually be asking you all these questions and come over as nice, and you give them certain information and they glean it all, and then they go away, produce a few shirts and flogging them off, and Matchworn this, Matchworn that, and that spoils the market in which I collect.
Okay, that's what I'm confused about. What actually is the market? What is the appeal? So you can have people who are interested in a shirt because of a particular design, then you can have it's iconic because of a period in which it was worn, or it's specifically match worn. So why would you want a match worn shirt, for example, of a particular match or a particular player? What is that draw there, as opposed to having a replica or having a player issue shirt? Even if it's got a wash label in it, it's still got the same design, it's still got the same cut as a match worn. What is the appeal of a match worn shirt?
Well, that's like asking somebody why they collect a certain type of match day program, or they just generically collect match programs. Why do you collect big game programs? Oh no, I collect everything. The appeal for me about match worn shirts, and why I started collecting match worn shirts, was that everyone wants to be a footballer. All young boys, majority of young boys want to be a footballer. Some want to be rocket scientists, but the majority of them want to be footballers if they can. 99.9% of us have got no chance. So I went and worked in football, which was the next best thing for me. So there are a lot of people who work at football clubs in various departments within football clubs. You know, some of the Premier League clubs have thousands of people working for them these days. But the next best thing for me is being in the dugout. I can't be on the pitch, but what I can do is I can get a memento of that battle that's gone on the pitch. And that memento is a shirt that was worn by a player in that particular game. So for me, it's the closest you can get to the action without being there.
Okay.
And that's why I collect Matchworn shirts. And as I said, everyone has different collecting principles. You know, why does so-and-so collect a shirt? You know, there'll be other Matchworn shirt collectors who'll tell you something completely different why they collect Matchworn shirts. And there'll be lots of people who tell you they collect replica shirts because they can't afford a Matchworn shirt. And there's no shame in that, but they don't want to go down that route. But I'm collecting replica shirts because I want to get all of my favourite styles or all the team designs that my club's ever worn, or et cetera, et cetera. We all have different reasons why we collect shirts. Mine, personally, is because I collect Matchworn shirts because that is as close as I can get to it. And for me, as a Welsh shirt collector, you know, an international team of my country, that's a piece of history. Whether it's worn by Hal Robson-Kanu or John Charles, that is a piece of history. That guy has put on that shirt and gone out and played in an international for my team, representing my country, and this is the piece of material that he had on his back while he was doing it.
So it's the fact of the matter rather than necessarily the look, or from what you say there, I know you're interested in the styles as well, but it's getting the essence of that particular event and owning a part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been quite vocal on Twitter about how I dislike the Wales away kit, the new one, because for me, particularly international shirts, should use traditional colours.
Yeah.
And grey has absolutely zero connection to Wales in any way, shape, or form. It's traditional colour. It's just, I mean, we had a slate grey kit once before, and they like to call it slate grey because obviously North Wales is famous for slate. But you know, the only way you're going to get anywhere in Wales that's going to be that grey as the away kit is by lying on your back looking at the sky in Blaenau Festiniog on a rainy day. You know, I don't mind the design, but I'm thinking there are, you know, for me, Adidas could have done so much better job, and they could have even changed the colour but kept the design. You know, that sort of shadow hoop that it has.
Yeah.
But in a different colour. You know, Wales' traditional colours are away from home are yellow, green trim, that sort of thing. And they've obviously sampled with green and with blues and etc. And obviously now the vile grey. But as a Matchworn shirt collector, as much as I'm not a fan of the shirt, I still have to have one.
Okay. What are they wearing that against? Do they play Russia in the Euros?
There is a 99% chance that Wales against England will wear the away kit, and there's almost the same chance that they'll wear the grey against Russia, and they'll only wear red in the group stages as in a game against Slovakia, the first game.
Wales are going to wear the away shirt against England?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, come on.
I know. You see, this is a major debate that I've had. Now, that hasn't been confirmed yet, but I've been told that within a couple of weeks it will become knowledge, and hopefully I'll get a little exclusive on Twitter so I can rant about it. For me, that's sacrilege. That is absolutely horrendous that Wales have to change. And it's because of the daft UEFA rules and England deciding with Nike that they will have white shorts and red socks on their new kit. As England are drawn as the home team, the away team, if there's any clash at all, has to change.
That's utterly ridiculous, especially as it's a neutral venue, so there's no home team. England could just wear white socks or sky blue socks or some other colour of socks. It's over. I think It's thin.
For me, I agree with you totally, Jay. I think it is the most ridiculous thing in the world that the third longest international fixture, which traditionally the countries have never changed their colours, and they go to a major championships in the 21st century, and the UEFA regulations are so anal that they have to change.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I can't even believe what you've just told me. But would you do your best to get hold of, say, if Aaron Ramsey's playing in that game, his shirt for that game, because it was
I would
the game
take any
against
player's shirt from that game. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I because I worked in football, I do still keep in touch with a few people in football, and that helped me out when I wrote the Arsenal shirt book. You know, the connections I had in football helped me get to people that helped me nail certain facts about Arsenal's kit. But so I still keep in touch. And when I worked at the four professional football clubs I worked at, the 3 football league clubs I worked at were all, they still had boot boys, and the physio had a boot boy. He had a guy that cleaned his boots. So believe it or not, David Edwards, who's at Wolves now and plays for Wales, was my boot boy. And he was a tremendous boot boy. Joe Hart was my boot boy for a week and was the worst boot boy in the world. Joe and Dave are actually very good mates. But Dave, I've kept in touch with Dave ever since I was in Slovakia, when his first time he was ever on the bench for the Welsh senior team. It's quite a proud moment for me. I made sure his boots were clean, by the way. But he used to clean my boots. I've kept in touch with him ever since. And through going and watching Wales and stopping at the hotel, and Mel Pedrick, is a Hereford United legend, at the time was the Welsh physio when I used to go all the time to watch them. And obviously health reasons dictate I can't do that necessarily now. But I went, and so I got speaking to Mel, and Dave's introduced me to other players, and I've become friends with some of those. So they sort me out with shirts occasionally. Simon Church, for instance, had promised me, I gave him a bit of a ribbon. I said, the lad sort me out a shirt. Any chance, Churchy? And he was like, yeah, I'll sort you one out. So after the game, he comes into the players' lounge, and he sees me, and he tries to hide to start with. And I thought, he doesn't really want to give me a shirt. That's not a problem. I don't want to bend anyone's arm at their back and say, give me a shirt or I'll shoot you. But he came over and he rolled the shirt up. So I automatically knew at that stage, Welsh players had 2 shirts for every game. In fact, I think that's across the board now. You know, it's common knowledge that, you know, contrary to vicious rumor that's created by people who fake football shirts, players get 2 shirts a game.
Right.
At international level, it's very significant because it makes the shirts more precious, more personal to the players. If there's only 2 of them, 2 shirts available to them, then all the others are, you know, you don't want a multitude of other shirts available out there, because it detracts from the fact that they're your shirts you represent your country wearing. So anyway, he came over and he rolled the shirt up, and I knew that straight away. He went, there you go, pal. And I knew straight away he'd rolled it up because it was his long sleeve shirt that he didn't wear. So I unraveled it and I went, I can't believe that. And he went, what? Expecting me to rib him. And I said, you haven't signed it. So he put on the front of the shirt, to Shake Dog. Best wishes, Simon Church. Well, I said, I don't know what's worse. The fact you give me a long sleeve spare, or you call me Shake Dog, you know. But overall, the fact that I've managed to get the contact with the players through David Edwards to start with, and Mel Pedrick, etc. For instance, through Dave, I've got to know Sam Vokes very, very well. Vokes is a lovely lad, and he's always helped me out as well with shirts. And a few weeks ago on eBay, he donated one of his shirts to the Cumbrian flood appeal, and it was the Bosnia game shirt. Now, he's a substitute. Sam, sometimes players change shirts at halftime. The majority change shirts at halftime. So if they start the game, they'll wear a shirt in the first half, come in at halftime, take it off, towel themselves down so they're dry, put the clean shirt on, and go back out feeling a bit fresher for the second half. But Sam was a substitute against Bosnia, and this shirt was from the Bosnia game. Now, I knew that if he's a sub, he's obviously not going to have worn 2 shirts unless he came on in the first half, which he didn't.
Yeah.
So he's going to have his Matchworn shirt and a spare one. And I said to him, is this genuine? And he said, apart from the very camp photograph of him lying on a bed, because it was advertising a bed company, a mattress company, supporting the Cumbrian appeal. And I said, is this genuine? He said, yeah, it is, mate. He said, my other one is going in a frame and I'm keeping it because that's the qualifying game. And I said, I'm really interested in that, pal. And he said, oh, don't buy it. He said, I'll sort you out one of my shirts for the next 2 games, which were obviously Northern Ireland and Ukraine. And then he contacted me on the Saturday after the Northern Ireland game and said, I've got my shirt dry and lovely. He's obviously picking up a bit of Welsh as he's going along. He said, it's got it dry and lovely over my balcony at the moment. A bit like, all the lads you see when you go on holiday with their towels drying on balconies in hotels and things. So he's there at the team hotel with his Wales shirt hanging over the balcony drying. And because I like them to be smelly if I can, it's very sad. And my wife's got the nose of a bloodhound, so she can smell it coming up the drive if I've had a new delivery that day. And so I said to him, son, to be honest, pal, because I'd already got a shirt in that style from the Netherlands game, the first time they wore it. So I said, I'm not being picky, pal, but is there any chance, unless you score a hat-trick on Monday against Ukraine, any chance I could have an away shirt, your away shirt instead? Mm-hmm. And he went, oh, so you're getting fussy now, and hammered me, Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, yeah, I'll sort you out one of them then, pal. So anyway, eventually it arrives, and I open the bag, and there's both of them in there, to be fair. So not only do I like him, I love him a lot as well. Yeah. But he sent me both shirts, which included his grey shirt, which they wore against Ukraine for the first time.
Yeah.
I had to ask him for it, but I don't like it. But I had to ask him for it, and he let me have it. So I've got one.
that says that it's the event that you're interested in, and the fact that you don't, so you never wash it. Once you've got it, it never gets washed. Is that right?
No, it doesn't. No,
it doesn't.
It gets aired.
Yeah.
But I don't face. I know that certain shirt collectors spray Febreze on their shirts to make them smell nicer. Well, that's just because they're getting under pressure from the missus.
Yeah.
Find a room, an outhouse, or a shed at the bottom of the garden to hang them in. And not unless they're too precious and too expensive. Gotta be careful where you put them, because someone comes and robs your shed, and oh, look, there's an England shirt there. Oh, I think I'll take that away. So I in some ways, that adds to the authentication. Yeah, but equally, the fakers that are out there will do their utmost to try and replicate that.
Yeah. Look, so that says to me that it is certainly the essence of the match, almost in literal terms, that you want to get when you collect a shirt, when you get a shirt from a particular game or from a particular player. It's that moment in history. You want to keep it as authentic as you possibly can. But you say about so people will fake it. So what the big thing is the rolling it around in your garden thing. So if you look at most football shirts, they're not particularly muddy, but you'll find a shirt with dodgy provenance actually is quite muddy, because the way of making it look like it's match worn is supposedly to make it muddy. What do you have, like a checklist for shirts? For me, the only way you're ever going to know for sure, and this even goes for players giving you the shirts, is if the player gives you the shirt, it takes off the shirt in front of you as he's walking off the pitch and puts it in your hands. Anything past that, there's an element of faith involved. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you one more example. Again, it involves Sam. And I'm not his agent, by the way. But he promised me a shirt when Wales played Sweden in 2009. And he said, he came on a sub in the game, came into the players' lounge after the game and saw me, and straight away made his beeline for me, opened his bag, and he said, you want one of my shirts, pal? And I said, yeah. And he said, go on and take one. And I said, well, have I got a choice? And he went, what do you mean? And I said, well, you got your warm one and your spare one. He said, yeah. Do you want one more one, dear? And I said, yeah. He said, well, which one is it then? And I'm like, I didn't want to tell him that it should be the one that's a bit sweaty. And the short sleeve rather than the clean long sleeve one.
Yeah.
But I went, that'll be that one then, wasn't it, pal? He went, yeah, there you go, mate, and gave it me. So I see what you mean, but that way he didn't come off the pitch and physically give it to me. But Sam, there was only 2 shirts he had in his bag, and one of them was sweaty and short sleeve.
Yeah.
So that was the one he gave me because I asked him if I could have the match worn one. But
Yeah.
yes, there is always an element of not 100% certainty with shirts. There is a certain checklist, there's certain things you go through. And one of the things that I do is a lot of people say when they get given a shirt, a match worn shirt, they do not appreciate necessarily what it is. So the first question they'll ask you is it signed? And believe it or not, I've seen so many quality match worn shirts over the years with fake signatures on. And to me, that completely detracts from the quality of the shirt straight away. You know, and worst case example I've seen of that is a genuine number 7 Liverpool shirt from the late 70s, signed by Kenny Dalglish, and the signature on it was fake. And that just ruins it. And don't get me wrong, I'm no Liverpool fan, but that just ruins what is a first class shirt.
Yeah.
The provenance issue becomes a problem recently. The more modern the shirt is, the more difficult it is to get 100% cast iron provenance. I mean, Roger Hunt's, the England Liverpool striker, Roger Hunt's World Cup winner, Roger Hunt's shirt collection, memorabilia collection, or part of it, comes up at Graham Budd Sotheby's auction on Monday, Tuesday of this week. And you know in there that all those shirts are what they are. The problem is, because England shirts are very similar, or all the same in some cases, you know, you have to give different detail. You have to say that the shirt can possibly have been worn in the following games. You can't be very specific in some cases. Other cases, you can be absolutely bang on. For instance, he's got 3 number 21 white England shirts from the 1966 World Cup.
Yeah.
But he can't attribute any of the games of the previous 5 games he played wearing white. He can't attribute them to any of the games.
No. That is a crazy scenario, isn't it? That it's got modest provenance then, because you can't be so specific about it, but still those shirts are so much more valuable than a shirt that you can say that the player came on for the last 5 minutes of the game and he wore it in that 5 minutes. So you can be so specific about that, you can know for sure. But this shirt is so much more valuable as a result, despite it being vague about when it was worn. So yeah,
because you see, there are different pieces of the jigsaw, as I said before, that make up the provenance of the shirt, and one of them was, as I mentioned, was the shirt size. You know, nowadays it's like the last piece of the jigsaw. What size of shirt does the player normally wear? And in that case, with the Roger Hunt shirt, you know, from the World Cup, the provenance is cast iron. What you can't be is game specific.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a match worn shirt in a World Cup finals from a team, from a player and a team that went on and won it. And I don't think, apart from getting game specific detail, you can get much better than that if you're an England shirt collector, for instance.
Yeah. The whole I mean, match worn shirts isn't necessarily my thing, but it does fascinate me, the idea of why a shirt is interesting, why you can be more certain. And there's other things like in particular competitions, the sponsor size might be different and that kind of thing, so that helps. But again, it's something you can fake, and it's something that it can be match prepared but then not worn, but then you change it so it looks like it was match worn. So one thing I did see on it was on the Classic Football Shirts Facebook page once. They had a particular shirt, a shirt that Ronaldo, they were claiming Ronaldo had worn it. Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo. Yeah. He had worn it for Real Madrid. And it was the classic thing, it had some mud on it. And so it's a match worn shirt that Ronaldo wore. So it's a hugely valuable shirt on that basis. If it is match worn, if he wore it specific game, and they had this stain, and it was on the sleeve, I think, and they managed to find a picture of the moment in the game where he'd fallen and he had rubbed his sleeve against the ground, and you looked at it, and suddenly it was all right. You could have faked that. So what order did these events happen? So if you look through pictures of the game, or you look through the video of the game, oh, he fell over there. That means he might have a bit of mud on the shirt, so I can put that on. So that's possible. But then that sounds like a hell of a lot of work. But I know, well, I'm pretty sure that it happened the other way around. They got the shirt arrived at their feet, and then they said, okay, well, let's have a look at the game to see if that's likely that it would have been muddied up that way. And then to find that picture and see that, yeah, it probably was. In this case, he did get his shirt muddy. That's a fantastic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, they call it photo matching now. I mean, it's an American thing, because the American sports memorabilia market is I think personally that it's so much more stringent, so much more policed than it is over here, or in Europe or anywhere else in the world. But American collectors will maybe say something slightly different to that. But to us, or for me personally, I think it's so much better in America when you collect the jerseys. And I could see I'm calling them jerseys now, which is what the Americans would call them. And they would call them game used and not match worn as well. But, obviously they don't do the soccer jerseys so much over there, but they do. They have a huge market for basketball and ice hockey and baseball and American football. Obviously, the other fifth biggest sport in America is NASCAR racing. And I'm not sure that, you're going to collect overalls from NASCAR drivers, but somebody probably does. But either way, those, and particularly in ice hockey and baseball, the provenance is so important. And I've always said I've become that type of collector now, where the provenance is important. I've walked away from shirts that I'm sure have been 100% spot on, but maybe my gut feeling tells me I'm not comfortable with the story or the history or the provenance that I'm being given with the shirt, and I've walked away. And I've probably walked away from a number of very, very good shirts in the time I've been like that. But I think that's the only way you can protect yourself, because you buy a hooky match-worn shirt with no provenance and continue to spout the story that you originally told when you bought it, and then it's found out to be fake. Your resale value of that shirt is zero. I always say to people, don't collect football shirts. Don't collect them as an investment. You shouldn't collect memorabilia as an investment. You're obviously aware that certain things are likely to increase in value over time, but it's like anything. The bottom could fall out of the market at any stage for any reason. So you shouldn't buy as an investment. Never buy a match-worn football shirt as an investment. Always buy it to enjoy it. And if over time it accrues a value greater than what you paid for it, that's a bonus.
I suppose, as a way of continuing the hobby, there has to be an element of considering the worth of different shirts. And after time, does a shirt that you've owned for, say, 5-10 years then become a shirt where you can go, well, actually, this is valuable now, so I can get rid of this shirt in order to get more shirts that will now mean more to me as I go forward? Would that be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people who collect, and they will release things from their collection in order to fund the purchase of another item that's more desirable to them. That happens. But you shouldn't be buying, in my opinion, you shouldn't be buying memorabilia of any kind thinking it's going to accrue in value. I mean, you go and buy a Steve McQueen autograph or whoever, a Lady Diana autograph, you know that you're going to get a lot of money for those things. Michael Jackson's another one. I think, Tiger Woods used to be, in sporting terms, used to be a massive signature to get because he was such a difficult signer. But do people want Tiger Woods signatures so much now?
Yeah.
And that's what can happen. And you don't know what's going to happen in the match-worn shirt market in the future.
Yeah. I think that's where if you are doing something for an investment and you get something in order to sell it on, and even if you're talking over 10 years and it's to fund a pension or whatever it is,
Yeah.
there is always going to be, if that's your end goal, that's when the temptation to fake things must come in, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I see one of the common things that a lot of people write, and it's a common faker's trait when they, for instance, eBay. For me, eBay is a bit of a gutter when it comes to Matchworn shirts, because it's just such a mixed bag, and predominantly the actual genuine number of Matchworn shirts on there is quite small. But when you read in descriptions, people go, it can only go up in value. It would look great framed. You know, I never frame a Matchworn shirt now, ever. I mean, I did when I first started collecting, and regret it, because framers don't appreciate what they might have in their hand.
No.
And so they don't care how it goes in the frame.
No.
And I've seen some absolute horrors, not mine, thankfully, but I've seen some horrors where people have cut shirts to make them fit on frames and stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's scary. So, yeah, you know, I wouldn't get them framed. But when you read somebody say it can only go up in value, that turns me off straight away. I think, no, it isn't about that. You know, for me, if somebody's talking straight away about how much is that worth, that's vulgar to me. That just, you know, when that's like buying a Picasso and going for £1 million and thinking, oh, in 10 years' time it's going to be worth 10. You know, it's like, no, because for me, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But ultimately, I sit on a Wales shirt collection. That's some very, very old. Old doesn't always make them more valuable, by the way. But old classic players from games. I was going to say from classic games, but Wales have only been to one tournament previously, so I won't go down that route. But the you know, my Wales shirt collection will have a value, and if I consigned it to auction now, you know, I would accrue more than what I've paid for the collection. But that's not what it's about for me. For me, it's about the history. It's about protecting the history, because as collectors, we're not. Then we don't technically we technically own the shirt, but we're not. We're just keeping them, aren't we? Because when I turn my toes up and go to the big kit room in the sky, somebody else is going to own those shirts, and you hope it continues on for generations. And these items, these historical items, which they are to me, you know, become more precious and more valuable. I mean, if only people in Victorian England knew what football shirts history and research and collectability of what those garments they wore in the battle were going to be talked about now, I'm sure there would have been a few people snaffling them away and sticking them in leather suitcases for future generations.
Yeah, but people didn't know what football was going to become. So
no, they didn't know.
No.
I mean, a classic case of a Welsh international from the 1980s, and I'm not going to name drop. He said to me, when I played international football and when I played in cup finals and I got my shirts, I didn't collect them, I kept them. And now, without realizing it, those shirts have accrued a value. And a lot of the older players are very surprised by what their shirts are worth. You know. And then when I asked another player why he'd sold his collection and had real no interest in shirts, he said, to me, they were my work clothes.
Okay, so your knowledge of football shirts through Matchworn shirts through collected, it led you on. I suppose it was an organic thing, or it was something you gravitate towards, was creating a book about a football team. And it was Arsenal that you've done the book on, the Arsenal shirt book. How did that come about? Who was involved in that, and what was the aim of it? Was there a kind of a mission that you had in creating that book?
It's basically, it was a personal thing to start with, that I wanted to do something to do with shirts. And although it wasn't about Matchworn shirts, with John Devlin's books, for instance, they'd obviously planted a seed, and that seed germinated. And I thought, you know, it'd be nice that people can see the shirts that players actually wore, or were attributed to players for certain occasions, and the different styles that a club has worn. And I'd had different ideas, and I'd spoken to other collectors about different other clubs previously, even international teams, like doing an England shirt book, and there was an idea to do an FA Cup final shirt book, and just use shirts from all the cup finals from both teams if possible. That's a task in itself, but it wasn't going to happen. And then obviously I'm good friends with an Arsenal shirt collector called James Elkin, and James has an amazing collection of Arsenal Matchworn shirts, and and I knew through connections with Arsenal Football Club a few people, and I knew about certain collectors that collected. And what you've got to remember is that there are collectors out there of memorabilia and that includes Matchworn football shirts that don't go on the internet. You don't even know they exist. They can be very wealthy individuals, and they have an amazing collection of memorabilia associated with their club. And that was the case with Arsenal. There was one particular collector, well, actually two, because I found out subsequently that one of the other guys that was referred on to us has an amazing collection of Matchworn shirts. And so we found that James said to me, look, I can get in front of a very significant individual at Arsenal who will hopefully give us the nod to say, yeah, these are the people you need to speak to. Let's do Arsenal. So kind of James knew about my ideas and said, well, why don't you do Arsenal first? Let's do Arsenal. He got into the driving seat and said, come on, let's go. So we did. Like 2011-12 time. And at the time, I'd been obviously talking a lot to John Devlin about design of the book. And of course, we get the go-ahead from Arsenal that, yes, this is what you can do. This is what you can't do. You cannot impinge on IP. You cannot, you can't do such and such. And of course, we were talking about doing little graphics in the book, and they said you can't do that. You can't do a graphic of an Arsenal crest. You can't do a graphic of an Arsenal kit. But if you're photographing shirts that you physically own that are yours, even though they have an Arsenal crest on and whatever, you can do that. So we went right. So we checked everything out with the legalities of them. We got a confirmation back from Arsenal to say, yes, this is what you do. And at the time, they hadn't actually announced who their new publishing company was going to be. And we wanted to get on with it. So we went, okay, we'll do it. We initially said, let's do it ourselves. And then we realized that was a mammoth task. To be fair, to self-publish, especially the first time you do a book, self-publishing is a mammoth task. So through advice from Neville Evans, whose collection I curate, he said speak to a few publishers, and obviously he's had dealings with publishers as well himself. And so I contacted a couple, and myself and James went down and met with Vision Sport Publishing. So they've got this reputation. I think they won Best Illustrated Sports Book Award at the British Sports Book Awards for about 3 years running, with and that's down to the design team, where of course then that affected John's involvement in the project. So we lost John's input, and in hindsight, I've said to James in the past, I would still like to have kept John involved, because the depth of knowledge that John has about the football shirts, the subject matter, that would have been great to have kept John involved. And in hindsight, like I said, it's a wonderful thing, and I would go back if I could do that again. That would one thing I would change. Other than that, we got the shirt list together of who owns what shirts and which ones we want, and we wanted to get as a chronological order and as many of the shirts as we possibly could, styles of the shirt, and we achieved that with, I think, since 1965, and the book was published in 2014. So basically, that's for 50 years. For argument's sake. We had all but 6 styles of shirt, of which 4 of those styles were worn in the 1960s. when, as you know, that you're just not going to get those shirts anymore, because that was an era when shirts were just reused and passed down and reused and passed down again. So the youth team were wearing the first team shirts from 2 seasons before, and then eventually they were ripped up by the kit man and used as rags to clean the manager's car. And so they just didn't survive. So there were 4 shirt styles from the 60s that we didn't get. And then bizarrely, there's a one-off shirt that Arsenal wore in a Boys Brigade centenary game against Aberdeen in pre-season of 1983, and it was a complete one-off. It didn't even have an Arsenal crest on it. It was a red-bodied shirt with long blue sleeves, and Aberdeen in their home game wore blue. And these shirts were all given to the Boys Brigade to sell. They weren't auctioned; they were sold, and we cannot track one. I mean, there are people who've been on that mission for a long time. And apart from a CSI investigation into every cellar and attic in Aberdeen, I don't think we'll ever find one. That was the latest one that we, the most recent one we couldn't find. Yeah. And then, of course, oddly, in 1977-78, Arsenal wore, which a lot of people consider to be a great away shirt, the traditional colours of yellow with blue trim. And the first time they had a long sleeve shirt with a blue trim was that season, 77-78. And they had this huge blue cannon, not the traditional cannon that was normally embroidered on the shirt crest, as the shirt crest. It was a bigger one. It had a bigger wheel and whatever. And it was plumb in the middle of the chest. And people loved it, at the time. I remember it. I think Arsenal were playing against Nottingham Forest when Archie Gemmill scored goal of the season in that kit. And I think when David Coleman famously says, and Peter With, Archie Gemmill's come all the way from the back and With hasn't seen him. He has now, 2-0, or whatever it's what he was famous for saying. Excuse me, I'm not in the streets of San Francisco right now. That's a police car going by. So it was a very, very famous kit. They wore it in the semi-final at Stamford Bridge against Orient in the semi-final, and but for the final, Arsenal were very resistant to change. So for the final, they wore an Airtex shirt, but it was a crew neck, short sleeve crew neck, but it was Airtex. But it was the first time ever that an Umbro logo appeared on an outfield Arsenal player shirt. And Umbro needed to brand the shirts for the final. So they went to Arsenal and said, this is what we want you to wear. This has got the branding on it. And then, of course, then they went, and to pacify you a little bit, we put these AFC cannonballs underneath the cannon. So the cannon barrel of the cannon saw the addition of the AFC cannonballs for the first time ever in that game. And that was what it was. It was all to do with branding. So these shirts weren't used on the big occasion, having been worn all season, similar to what Liverpool did in '85 when they played in the European Cup final wearing Adidas kit, and they'd worn Umbro all season, Yeah. And so that shirt, the 77-78 is away, 77-78 away shirt is just the most difficult to find. They just don't exist. But most of the time, shirts survived. For instance, the only shirt in the book of the first ever yellow shirt that Arsenal wore, it made in long sleeve. It didn't have a blue trim, and they used it in long sleeve version between 1968 and 1976-77. And the only one we could find in the book that survived was the League Cup final from 1969, because it was a cup final and players were able to take them home.
Yeah. Because it's a one-off. You're not going to use it again. Yeah.
But all the normal standard shirts have just been reused and reused until they fall apart. And I mean, that's what, subsequently to the book's release, we went and visited a player whose mum had made him in the early 50s, 1951, had made him an Arsenal shirt out of a white shirt. And she'd unstitched the sleeves. She'd taken off the collar, and she dyed the body of the shirt red and stitched the sleeves and the collar back on. And the player still had it. And then he pulled out this suitcase and said, I've got a few other bits, lads. And James was there, and he, because he'd wrapped them up in tissue paper, he went, that's blue. There's a blue shirt in there. He pulled it out, and it was the 1967-68 Arsenal blue away shirt, the navy shirt. It's the only one known to exist. It was like discovering a new species of animal, honestly. And then, of course, he pulled out the all red shirt that Arsenal wore from 65 to 67.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "You acquired these from training, didn't you?" And he went, "Yeah." He said, "I must have put them in my bag and taken them home without realising it. And we were using them in training."
The book is fantastic, and it has all these kind of some wonderful shirts in it, and I'm still more interested in the modern day ones. So I like the fact that the red currant shirt in the Champions League didn't have the embroidery around the crest and that kind of thing. So that's all fantastic. And obviously there's a story about the red currant shirt that's been talked about before. But people just need to get the book because it's about to sell out, isn't it? Or it's close to selling out. So this is your last chance to get it, and just everyone's got to own it. It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, I've been overwhelmed personally by the response. I've been blown away, and a lot of people. I mean, we've had just amazing feedback on it, and the fact that we thought we were going to take, at best case scenario, 5 years to sell out of the book, and we're 18 months down the line, and the publishers told me, we'll be lucky to get to Christmas with what we've got left in stock with the way sales are going. And of course, the knock-on effect from that was that Arsenal, when they saw the book, the people in the clubs have both said to myself and James, "You've done an Arsenal shirt book in the way Arsenal Football Club would love to have done it, but didn't have the resources to do it all the time." And that's probably one of the nicest things that they have said, for a football club to say that to you, or people representing a football club say that to you. And of course, the knock-on effect to that again was that we ended up doing the feature in the program this season, selecting out a shirt from, a famous shirt, and doing an expanded feature on it that's not, it's expanded upon what's written in the book, and also updates the information because research keeps going.
Just a couple of things I want to leave people with. What's the best shirt that you own at the minute?
Goodness me, the best shirt I own at the minute. If I'm honest, it can change. It can change daily, weekly. It changes. Depends on mood. And I mean, as a Welshman, I collect Ryan Giggs shirts, so I've always thought he's a standout player of his era. One of my favourite shirts in my collection would be the 2005 FA Cup final shirt, the black shirt that United wore against Arsenal. First time Nike had two teams in an FA Cup final. And first time it was ever decided on penalties. But Ryan Giggs came on at the start of extra time, and I was at the game with a friend of mine, and he at the end of the game, he clapped the United fans that were left. Then I was still up in the upper tier, and below us, he walked over, and it was a young lad gesturing to him, can I have your shirt? So he took it off and he gave it to this kid, and there was an elderly gentleman stood next to him, and I thought, could it be the first time in history that anyone's ever parachuted down the Millennium Stadium using their coat and landing on someone to steal the shirt? But I thought, well, fair play to him. He's got this shirt. And then it popped up on eBay, and it was Neville Evans who said to me, "You're not interested in that Giggs shirt then?" Mm-hmm. So I went and looked at it, and it turns out that it was his shirt. And so I got into conversation with the guy, and he confirmed it, and because I knew where he was sitting, so I asked him to show me evidence of the ticket where he was, and he still had it, and he wrote a letter to confirm and everything else. But I'd physically seen Ryan Giggs give this shirt to this lad, and I bought it. And so I suppose the story that goes with that, and the fact it's Ryan Giggs and a cup final shirt, because in memorabilia circles, for whatever reason, Manchester United carries a premium. So the fact it's a Manchester United shirt from an FA Cup final from one of my favourite players of the last 20 years, and and the story that goes with it, physically seeing the player give it to this lad after the game, and eventually, 10 years later or 8 years later, whatever it was, getting it back. It was just, so I suppose the Ryan Giggs Matchworn 2005 FA Cup final would be one of my favourites.
Okay.
But I have numerous ones,
I mean, how about a Holy Grail shirt, one that you want that is always, you mentioned the Arsenal shirt with the blue sleeves. Would that be the one that you'd really like to own?
As I'm not an Arsenal fan, I'm an adopted Gooner, I think. That's what they call me nowadays, because I wrote the book. I know James Elkin would love that shirt. But for me personally, I think there's probably two Holy Grails. One of them would be a John Charles Wales shirt, just because of all the Welsh players, legends that have ever played the game, from his era onwards. He's probably the only legend I don't have a shirt of, and he's up there as probably the greatest. Yeah, so I'd love to own a John Charles shirt, and the reason being, not only was he's a Welsh legend, but he managed my team. He was player manager of Hereford United, and that kind of adds a little bit more to it. So I would, but the problem with John Charles shirts is they go for anything over $2,500. But I'd love to own one of those, and the Admiral shirts. I'm an Admiral fan, massive Admiral fan, and I understand that if you miss that era, you don't get it. People look at it and go, "That's ugly." They don't get it. But in 1978, Admiral produced a Hereford shirt with red and black trim. It's fantastic, but none of them survived again. But I would love to own one of those. I mean, I managed to get hold of a 1980-81 Admiral shirt, which is my pride and joy in my Hereford collection, without doubt. Because not only is it a great shirt, and it's Admiral, and it's old, and it's one of the oldest surviving Hereford shirts I know of, but it's also worn by my favourite ever Hereford United player, so Jimmy Harvey. So those would be my two: a John Charles Wales shirt and a Hereford United 78-80 Admiral shirt.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Shakey. This has been fantastic. Pleasure talking to you. The Arsenal shirt book, the Arsenal shirt as it's called, it's still available, but people should hurry along and get that. You could follow the Arsenal shirt on Instagram as well, which is _Arsenal_shirt. Is that right on Instagram?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then on Twitter, it's the Arsenal shirt, and it's on Facebook as well. You also have the work that you do for National Football Shirt Collection, which is nationalfootballshirtcollection.com. Is that so? And then you're on Twitter as Shakey Matchworn, and then there's an Instagram account for that, which is Wales _Matchworn, and then there's the Wales Football Shirt Museum on Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah.
So the football shirt website is walesmatchshirts.com for that as well.
Yeah. And and the websites, the National Football Shirt Collection, has spin-offs from that, because the England collection of Neville Evans is so vast. It deserves its own website. But all the websites within the umbrella of the National Football Shirt Collection will, over the next 12 months, be overhauled and have a revamp and an update and become more modern and slinky and pop up toast and make coffee, as I said to you earlier.
Okay. Well, that's good. We look forward to that. So brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And we'll maybe talk again, because this has been fantastic. If you want to contact Shakey, as you say, Shakey Matchworn on Twitter is probably the easiest way to get hold of him. If you've got any questions to do with football shirts.
Don't ask me what size Aaron Ramsey wears. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, because you're probably faking it if that's the case. Yeah, so if you want to get hold of me, I'm J29ers on Twitter, but probably go to Shakey for things first, I'd imagine. I'm far more interesting. Designfootball.com is our website, designfootball.com on Facebook, and Design Football on Twitter if you want to let us know anything, if you want to say anything about the podcast, just get in touch there. But aside from that, thank you, Shakey, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Jay.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.